theyeshiva.net.
I was only 13 or 14 years old at the time, but the memory of that Friday night, I could still see in front of my eyes. Growing up just a few blocks from here, it was Friday night, Shabbos Parshas Vayakhel, Adar this month, Tafshin Memvav, 1986. I always davened Shabbos and much of the week in 770. And already as a young child, I had the place where I stood when the Rebbe would come down Friday night for Kabbalah Shabbos. But as the Rebbe walked in to the shul, I, like everybody else, noticed physical anguish on his face. And then I saw the Rebbe limping and almost had to be caught a few times, to the point that for the way back, they put tables that he should be able to lean on them as he walked out. Later I heard that it seemed like this was a case of very severe sciatica. Those Faken Yidin gedacht, whoever endured sciatica and a severe case of it, could know the physical pain. And I think it was already the next morning that the Rebbe davened upstairs, and this went on for quite a while. But that Shabbos was also Shabbos Mevarchim. So the Rebbe came down to Farbrengen, and it was not easy to watch him coming down and reaching his place at the Farbrengen. As a young child, a bacher actually, shortly after Bar Mitzvah, I didn't understand much. I still don't understand much. But it was very obvious that at least from a physical perspective, the Rebbe was in tremendous, tremendous pain. I asked myself, what's the Farbrengen going to look like? Is the Rebbe going to do a very, very short Farbrengen? And it was already later years, the Rebbe sometimes would Farbrengen much shorter. Maybe he'll do a very short Farbrengen, it's Shabbos Mevarchim, so the Rebbe will want to say something and Farbrengen, but we'll go up earlier. I was just thinking to myself, I didn't know. But every step, literally, you could see every step was koruch. The Siyum HaRambam, it seemed excruciating. And as somebody who never saw the Rebbe like that, certainly not in public walking into shul, would usually walk in with his full malchus and glory and atzilus. It was very, very difficult. Some people connected it at the time. Shortly before that began the court case of the library of the Svarim of Agudas Chasidei Chabad. I don't know, that's beyond me, what the connection was, what the cause was. But then the Rebbe started to Farbrengen, and it was the Shabbos of the Siyum HaRambam. This was the second Siyum HaRambam. The first one was Yud Aleph Nisan Tafshin Memhei, 1985, exactly 40 years ago. This was the second Siyum HaRambam, which was Adar Tafshin Memvav, 1986, Vayakhel. That Farbrengen turned out to be one of the longest Farbrengens of those years. And if I'm not mistaken, the Hadran on the Rambam, that I still remember parts of, went for an hour and a half. And when the Rebbe got into the Rambam, suddenly all the pain, the anguish that I observed the night before and just a little while earlier as he walked into the Farbrengen, it was literally, you looked at the Rebbe's face and you can experience a mayein olam haba, a tainug ha'atzmi ha'bilti murkav, as much as the human eye can perceive, a bliss, as he analyzed and dissected the opening halacha of the Rambam in one of the timeless classic hadronim of the Rambam known as the Tafshin Memvav Hadran, explaining the first halacha and the other halachas, what is Yedias Hashem. And For a 14-year-old, you have to understand, it wasn't just an impression. Suddenly I saw, wow. It was literally, as the Rebbe went into the Rambam, like everything was forgotten. He was living in the world of the Rambam, of the Mishnah Torah. And as the Rebbe developed the Siyum of the Rambam and the Hadran of the Rambam, the end of the Rambam, especially the beginning of the Rambam, you could viscerally feel the excitement, the joy, the ecstasy, and the celebration. You saw that the Rebbe himself was in a completely different world. Reminds me, in parentheses, very powerful lesson I once heard from Rabbi Leibel Groner, Zechrona Livracha. He said that it was the last few months, it was Tovshin and Beis. I think it was the month of Cheshvan, Kislev or Tevis, shortly before the Rebbe's stroke, and they said the Rebbe told him one day in his room, he says, "As ich effen a Gemara is mishver zen hagos habach." When I want to learn Gemara, it's hard for me to see and read hagos habach, which is very small, which was the Rebbe's way of saying that he needs somebody to help him with the eyes, and that's when the Rebbe went to an eye doctor. Rabbi Groner wanted to tell another part of the story, the Rebbe's conversation with the eye doctor. But then I thought to myself, he could have told his secretary, I have a problem seeing. He didn't say that. He said, I have a problem reading Hagos Habach. That's my challenge, that's my problem. So I saw that viscerally that Shabbos. But there's one thing in that Sikha that I want to share with you today on the opening of the Rambam. As you know, the Rambam opened up every one of his 14 Svarim with a pasuk. And it's always interesting to note which pasuk he uses. And the Rebbe would discuss these psukim frequently. What's the opening pasuk for the opening of the Mishnah Torah? It's a pasuk from Tehillim Kuf Yutes, right before the introduction of the Rambam. Remember the pasuk? Oz loy evosh bahabiti el kol mitzvosechel. Then I will not be ashamed and humiliated when I gaze, when I look at all your mitzvahs. And the Rebbe asked, why did the Rambam choose this pasuk as an opening for the Mishnah Torah? True, it mentions all the mitzvahs. Much of Kuf Yutes mentions all of the mitzvahs. But the Rambam uses this word, I won't be embarrassed. Why should he be embarrassed? Why would anybody be embarrassed? What's the pusha? Almost a pusha. What's the busha? What's the shame? And how does this shame get refuted and healed through apiti al kol mitzvah? The Rebbe's answer was, and I'm going to use my own words a little bit because I want to try to explain it lefi ani is daiti the way I understood it or I understand it today, is the Rambam single-handedly wanted to change the landscape of Jewish scholarship, of Jewish learning, and therefore of Jewish history. It's hard for us today to appreciate it, but it's important to understand this. When the Rambam was living, the Rambam was born in the year Daled Tov Tzadik Hey, 1135. Some say 1138, but approximately that zip code. In Cordova, in Spain, Erev Pesach. The Rambam passed away 1204. Dalet, Tov Kuf Samach Hey, Chav Tevis, of course, in Egypt. In the Rambam's lifetime, you didn't have a work that organized Yiddishkeit in any conceivable way. If you wanted to have a full perspective of halacha of Torah, as the Rambam says in the introduction, you had to learn through Bavli and Yerushalmi, the Midrashim and Tosefta and Mechilta and the Braises and Sifra and Sifri, and all the Tshuvas of the Goinim and the Rabbanon Svurai, of course, besides Torah Shebeksav. And then you can have the full picture, and how many people in a generation can do that? And the Rambam wanted that every Jew should have a kinyan in Torah. Every Jew should have a full vision and perspective of the entire body and experience of halacha. What is Hashem's vision? What is the Torah's vision for the world? And for this, the Rambam literally had to take everything and begin almost from scratch to categorize. And on his own, he divides halach into 14 svarim, 14 categories: Mada, Ava, Zman, Noshim, Kedusha, Afla, Zroim, Avodah, Karbonis, Tara, Nezikin, Kinyam, Mishpatim, and Shoftim. Each one encompassing Achun Vei, that this is the applause, but okay. Encompassing 83 halachas that go into those 14 svarim. This was not just an achievement, it was an extraordinary historic achievement. As he puts it, kekatan kegadol. I want a sefer that takes the whole Torah Shebaal Peh, the whole halacha, and organizes it in a way that when you go from the beginning till the end, you have a full picture of every single halacha min HaTorah, min Divrei Sofrim, and min Hagim till the Rambam's age, on every subject of life that Hashem addresses. And nothing is excluded. Not the halachas of the Beis HaMikdash, not halachas of Mashiach, not Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, not Emunah and Hashkafa, not things that seem completely irrelevant at that time. The same seriousness that the Rambam discusses when it comes to the halachas of Shluchim or Shutfin, Niskei Mammon or Gnevo, Gzela, which are always relevant, is the same meticulousness when he's describing the Seder, the time of the Beis HaMikdash, when he writes about Tumas Tzaras, Metame Mishkav Moishav, Hora Aduma, Ubechanuni no bezois, that anybody who learns Rambam seriously, unfortunately, when I was growing up, there was an expression, I don't know if they still use it in yeshiva, I didn't do Rambam yet. Do. How do you do Rambam? I didn't do Rambam. But that wasn't the purpose. The purpose wasn't to do Rambam. The purpose wasn't even to say Rambam. Okay, maybe it's a zeiches, and it's like debates on the Kaira. Fine, zeiche lechurban. You want to have a zeiche for Rambam, so you do Rambam. That was not the point of the Rambam, and not the point of the Rebbe and his takana of the Rambam. The Rambam, just like the Rebbe, felt the truth, and it's a truth you could still feel today. Baruch Hashem, we live in a generation where there's endless classes of Torah, svarim printed on every subject of the world. Between MP3s and podcasts, between live shiurim and virtual shiurim, in almost every language, on so many different platforms, in every country, anybody could learn whatever they want, and people are learning Kein Yirbu Malach Haaretz, Kein Yirbu Oid Void. People in recent years began learning Bavli and Yerushalmi, Halacha and Midrashim, Kabbalah, Chassidus, Machshava, Tanakh, in ways that were maybe unprecedented in previous times because of the tremendous accessibility. But one thing you still see, and that is, somebody once said in English, people today are reading more and more about less and less. People know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Sometimes you meet people, B'nai Torah, they graduated 17 years of yeshiva. And if you have kids who survive the system, you know that takes a lot. They learned a lot. Yeah, whatever they learned. We're talking about guys who are serious. But then, you want to see if they have a grasp of Kol HaTorah Kula. They don't. There's something missing. There's a clarity that's missing. There's a broadness that's missing, an expansiveness. There's a decisiveness that's missing. And there's a tamtzis that's missing. When you learn Rambam seriously from beginning to end, but seriously, that means you need to understand not only every halacha, you need to understand the structure of a chapter. The Rambam didn't only want to give people the whole halacha, he wanted to teach people how to think, how to build ideas. Hilchos Shabbos, 30 chapters. Why 30? Why not 20? Why not 40? The Rambam built. He took a subject. Could be Shabbos, could be Erevin, could be Yom Kippur, could be Niskei Mammon, could be Hilchos Kelim, could be Sharavas Atumah, could be Hilchos Malachim, or Hilchos Avodah Zarah, Talmud Torah, Tshuva, or now Yesodei HaTorah. So, and he built it. He built it. What are you applauding that what? That I know a few of the halachas of the Rambam. Okay? I'll say, no. Auf dir gesagt geworden euch. The Rambam wanted to teach people how to build, how to think. Every halacha. But not only for a gadol, for a cotton. Some people are sitting and I'm not a big Talmud Chacham. I'm not a big Ben Torah. I barely survived yeshiva. But that was the whole point of the Rambam. The Rambam became a bestseller in his generation. I don't know if you know. Suddenly, the Rambam was the ultimate man who, like the Rebbe, felt Yiddishkeit belongs to the masses. He wanted to empower every person to master. He didn't want to give reasons. He didn't even give sources, and he was criticized for it because he wanted people to come out and have a clear synopsis and summation of Kol HaTorah Kula. Somebody asks you, what's Truma? What's Meiser Rishon? What's Meiser Sheni? What's Bikurim? What's Pigul? What's Noiser? What's Kedushas Mechitzis? What's the difference of Tumas Meis, Tumas Sheretz? What's an Avad Tumah? What's a Vlada Tumah? If you learned Rambam seriously, you know that. But you also know how you can prove God's existence. You also know why we believe Torah is Ben Hashemayim. You also know what it means to be a prophet, what it means to be a Navi. You also know what the world is going to look like when Mashiach comes. You also know what the schedule in the Beis HaMikdash was. And you also know exactly every detail till the Rambam's day of Hilchos Shabbos. So the Rebbe comes and says, this takes what we call in English guts. And the Rambam knew it. And the Rambam writes in his introduction in the Akdama, the Rambam says, I saw what's happening. I saw the crisis. Niyarti choitzni. I girded my loins. I took the courage, Ani, Moshe ben Maimon Asfardi, and I compiled and I wrote a sefer that will give you the whole Torah Shebaal Peh. And then the Rambam says, you have Tanakh, and you have this sefer, and you don't need any other sefer ever again for halacha. Now now who are you applauding now? The Rambam, okay, fine. Ist gefährlich. It sounded interesting. I was just quoting the introduction of the Rambam.
In honor of the Rebbe, please do not disturb.
They're not disturbing, they're applauding. You see what you want to see. I just see them applauding. Now here, if you may, this is God's sense of humor. The Rambam says, after my sefer, Einoit Sorich L'Shum Sefer Acher. You got everything. So what's Hashem's humor? No sefer in history has created so many commentaries on it like the Rambam. I think till today we know of more than 10,000 svarim written on the Rambam by the greatest of the greats, from the Beis Yosef all the way down to great Acharonim in our generations. Analyzing, they said, the Rambam says, you're not going to need another sefer. There was even one of the Rishonim who accused him and said, because of you, nobody will open up a Gemara again. You're causing the Gemara to go obsolete. In reality, what happened? Because of the Rambam, there was a whole new Gemara, a whole new depth in Gemara. No sefer has so many Pirushim like the Sefer Rambam. I don't think even Rashi and Chumash, if I'm not mistaken. Hafla the fella. It's an interesting little story. I saw this in the introduction to a sefer from a Lubavitcher Rosh Yeshiva. He says he was on Yechidus once by the Rebbe. He writes, so Yitzhi Yechidus Eitzel, Hadmur Lubavitch, I think it was Tovshin Lamed Zayin, in the 1970s. And he asked the Rebbe an interesting question. There's Rambam Hilchis Megillah v'Chanukah. How does the Rambam start off? Hilchis Chanukah, two halachas of history. B'mei Bayis Sheni, Dua Malchei Yavon, Pashtu Yodam B'mamoinam U'b'bnei Seim. He goes through the whole history of Chanukah briefly. He speaks about the war, the miracle of the menorah, U'mipnei Zeh, and that's why that's why they made the 8 days of Chanukah, Shetchilason B'chavekes. You look at Hilchis Megillah, coming now is the time for Hilchis Megillah, you're expecting the Rambam should say, B'mei Achashverosh, B'mei Mordechai ve'Esther, give us a summation, U'mipnei Zeh. They make Purim. He doesn't do that. In Hilchis Megillah, he starts off right away. You're supposed to read the Megillah by night and by day, right away into the halacha. So this Jew asked the Rebbe, I don't understand, it's not fair. Why doesn't he give you historical context of Purim? Good question. So he said, without a moment, the Rebbe said, it's Pashut. Read the introduction of the Rambam. Most people who learned Rambam in yeshivas didn't learn the introduction of the Rambam. And by the way, if tonight you're going to go home and you're going to decide just to learn the Hagdama of the Rambam, is Dayenu. You'll never look at Torah Shabbal Peh the same way. Just the introduction of the Rambam to Mishnah Torah is something you could learn a whole year. And if you'll have afterwards a taiva to learn the Rambam's introduction to Pirush HaMishnayos, which is like 50, 60 pages, then you'll see why you can't put it down. Everything, this should be obligatory study in every yeshiva, I believe. The Rambam's Akdama to the Yad and to the Pirush HaMishnayos, because you can't understand anything of the whole structure of Torah Shabbal Peh works without it. But most people don't learn the introduction. So the Rebbe said, look in the introduction. In the introduction, the Rambam says, read Tanakh, Torah Shebeksav, read this sefer Mishnah Torah, and then you don't need any other sefer to know halacha. So the Rambam expected that before you learn Mishnah Torah, what do you read first? Torah Shebeksav. Torah Shebeksav has Megillas Esther. He doesn't have to give you an introduction to Megillas Esther. You learn Tanakh, you know Purim. But Chanukah doesn't say anywhere in Tanakh. You have to learn Maseches Shabbos, Perek B'Mem Madlik and Daf Chaf Aleph, Tanu Rabbanan My Chanukah. You have to learn Megillas Antiochus. You have to learn other Svarim. So the Rambam, the Mishnah Torah, Hilchas Chanukah, he has to give you an introduction. You see how thought out it was, how calculated. Very pashut words from the Rebbe, but Pashtus Geonis. I was like, klar, of course, this is the Rambam. Not a joke. Anyone who takes the learning of the Rambam seriously, if you can't 3 prakim, 1 perek, but 1 perek, but learn it, gruntig, know what he's saying. Look at the halacha, go back, chazer. The Rambam was the most organized writer, thinker. I don't know if this, I'm sure a few people remember here. The first yahrzeit of the Rambam, after the Shir Rambam that the Rebbe established, was Chav Tevis, Tafshin Memhei. The end of 84, the beginning of 85. The Rebbe made a surprise Farbrengen, I think around 6 p.m. I was in yeshiva, I was before Bar Mitzvah. But we heard, so we ran over to 770. I remember when I walked in, they were just putting out the tablecloth, and the Rebbe was already walking in. The place was empty. So the Rebbe sits down and he asks a question about himself. He says, the Rambam was the most organized person. How is it that a Farbrengen honoring the Rambam's yahrzeit is such a balagan? Such a Farbrengen, you have to prepare, you let the olam know before. You don't make us up, people were coming in, nothing was ready. I'll never forget the Rebbe's answer, it still guides me. And the Rebbe said, you know how you see an organized person? You don't see an organized person when you give him 3 months to prepare. What you see an organized person when you tell him it's happening now. And then you see if he's organized internally or he's just a control freak, what we call. In other words, if you're really organized right now, there's an internal rhythm and menuchas hanefesh. So he says, fakert, the Rambam was a real Mesuder. So this Farbrengen right here is the example of real Seder. And then the Rebbe said the famous Sikha, where the Rakatchover says once in Sofnas Paneach, V'hu Tam Ruchni, on the Rambam and Hilchas Reitzeach, about why you send a Rebbe to Ari Miklet, V'hu Tam Ruchni. I remember the Rebbe saying that the Rakatchover should say this is a spiritual reason. By the Rebbe, the Rambam and the Rakatchover together was like, almost the embodiment of Mashiach right before it comes into Olam Hazeh. Try it out and you'll see. So the Rebbe says, back to Vayakel Memvav, for those who are following. How could the Rambam say this? People could say, this is a little arrogant. You should be embarrassed. Really? You're the one? Ani, Moshe ben Maimon Asfardi? This is what the Rambam says, Ozle Yevosh. You know why I'm not embarrassed? Bahapiti el kol mitzvaysecha. Just like the Gemara says in Maseches Avodah Zarah. Kol mi she'eino yodei Eloheides u'moira. Rabim chalol mipila. Kol mi she'yodei Eloheides ve'eino moira. Atzumim kol harugeh. Just like if you don't know and you make believe you know, it's a crime. If you do know and you make believe you don't know, it's an equal crime. You know why? The Rambam says, Be noisi b'chol hasvarim. Hashem gave me the ability to see the bird's eye view of halacha. It's a responsibility. Lo yevosh. Embarrassment at such a moment is not humility. It's a complete disregard of your shlichus, of your mission in life. How classic vintage Rebbe in life. Humility doesn't mean you sit on your couch like a couch potato and say, me, ani, umani, I'm just another shmata. No, Bishvili Nivra, you were chosen to cast your light in the world. The Rambam says, because I gaze at all the mitzvahs. For me not to do it would be a betrayal of Hashem's vision, Hashem's plan for me, and what the Jewish people need most in Galus. And then, some of us still remember vividly the first Siyum HaRambam, Yud Aleph Nisan Tov Shem Mei in 770, and it was surprising because the Rebbe made a lot of Siyumim, but he wouldn't read from inside. The Rebbe made a Siyum HaShas every few years. Every yard said he made a Siyum Masechta, but he never read it inside. He would say over the Gemara by heart. And also not necessarily the words. He would explain it. Sometimes he said some of the words. But that Siyum, that Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe had the Rambam and he read through and he said he's going to do it, the last halacha, and he typed it up like a teacher would type it up to little children like he used to do with the Rashis, pointing. And then he read the first halacha and he typed it up word for word. And here we come to one more aspect, but it's really a derivative of the first, of what the Rambam really did. And I think part of the incredible power in learning and internalizing Rambam. The Rambam wanted to give people not just the details of Yiddishkeit. People learn halacha, Gemara, Nigla, other stuff, Poiskim, Rishonim, Achronim, their whole life, Kein Yirbu, Baruch Hashem, and it's so granular, it's so detailed. The Rambam wanted to not zoom in only, but zoom out and show people the vision of Matan Torah. The vision of Matan Torah, as the Rebbe once put it in a Farbrengen, zu machen von Welt a Torah Welt. To take the world and turn it into a world that reflects halacha, mitzvahs essay, mitzvahs loisese. And hence, the Rambam gave the Jewish people a geula consciousness. What do I mean? You weren't only a Jew, impoverished, living in Spain, or wherever you were living in Africa or in Europe, or in the Holy Land, downtrodden in Galus. Yes, that was the Rambam's age, as it's still our age, sadly. But the Rambam wanted to give the Jewish people the vision of creation. And therefore he wrote a sefer to show what does the world look like when the vision of the Rebbeinu Shalom is ultimately manifested and embodied. It was one of the sikhs, the Rebbe explained the gewaltige Chiddush, answering the Chassam Sofer's big question. The Chassam Sofer in Charles Setshuvas, I think Kufnun Vav, he says he doesn't understand why the Rambam made Mashiach one of the 13 principles of faith. The Rebbe once said over this Chassam Sofer in Aleph Nisan Farbrengen Siyum HaPsachim with Pchiyos Noiroyos, because he understood the Chassam Sofer. The Rebbe held very much from the Chassam Sofer. What the Chassam Sofer said, I don't understand. Mashiach is the cherry on the cake. Mashiach is the reward. Mashiach is gewaldig. But why is it the ikir of Torah? He says, Chas v'sholem. Chas v'sholem, he says, we know Mashiach will come, but let's say God says, I'm not. He says, does it change anything? He says, the Aseres HaShvatim, according to the shit of Rabbi Akiva and Sanhedrin Kuf Yud, they're not coming back. He said, are they not mechuyev in Torah mitzvahs? They're not mechuyev in tefillin. They're not mechuyev in Shabbos. They are. If you get rid of Hashem, Chas v'sholem, Torah min Hashemayim, you don't have Torah, you don't have halacha. But even if you take away Mashiach, like some Sefer says, I know Mashiach will come. But what makes it an ikir? It's not a foundation. It's a beautiful thing that we're going to have. But even if we didn't have it, you still have to do Torah mitzvahs. As the Rebbe put it then in Koyoyma Loi Chafatzti Hineini. The great question of the Chassam Sofer. What's the Rebbe's answer for this question? The Rebbe's answer for this question is the Rambam saw in Mashiach the ikir of das, because Mashiach basically tells you that God's plan, Hashem's plan, is actually going to be realized. At Matan Torah, Hashem gave the Jewish people a blueprint. Take the world and change it. Turn it into a Torah world. Is it ever going to happen? Or is it just a nice dream? Most of the mitzvahs we don't even have today. Hilchas Mashiach by the Rambam is essential to Yiddishkeit because it basically means the vision of Hashem for the world is happening. It's going to happen. It's real. Jews are changing the world through Torah and mitzvahs. And that's why the Rambam holds that Mashiach doesn't have to make miracles. It's not a little detail. If Mashiach has to make miracles, it means you don't believe in the power of Torah and Yiddishkeit to create the world of Teva according to the Ratzon HaBorei, which is the whole vision of Matan Torah. And therefore, the end of the Rambam, according to the Rebbe, is not just beautiful things that are going to happen in the future. It's the summation of halacha. It's the concretization and embodiment of the divine vision for the universe happening in real time and real space. When he says, "U'ba'osei hazman, lo yiyasham, lo yirav, lo milchama, lo kina, lo tachrus, sha'atov v'tiyah mishpas harbe v'chol ha'ma'adanim mitzuyin ka'ofor." And by the first Siyum, you know what the Rebbe said on these words? Everybody learns the Rambam. But we just heard the Siyum from Rav Reitwurst, and it looks like beautiful words. There won't be hunger. There won't be war. That's nice. There won't be jealousy. There won't be competitiveness. Why? A lot of goodness. All the delicacies will be as common as dust. It looks a little redundant. So the Rebbe said, no. Listen. Lo yirav v'lo milchama. There won't be hunger and war. There'll be so much good. I won't be hungry. You won't be hungry. We won't have to fight. But we could still be jealous. Just because you think billionaires are not jealous of each other, they're more jealous of each other. Just because there's a lot of goodness, it doesn't take away jealousy and competitiveness. That's why the Rambam adds, well, you say by Bir Chametz Ka'afra Da'ara. It's going to be there, but it's Ka'afar. It's meaningless. So you're going to get jealous that you have more sand in your sandbox than me? Explains Rav and Milchama. Hamadanim Mitzuyin Kafur explains Kina V'Tachrus. Das is abgeteilt der Rambam. Now people always learn the Rambam and said, which world is he talking about? But look at this world. Look at this world. Everybody is worried. AI is taking over the world. Artificial intelligence in 20 years, will anybody have a job? So the Rambam says, no, you'll be out of jobs. Solar energy, lo yirav, lo milchama, lo kinu. So what's yeah? Lo yiyeh esek kol ha'olam ela, lo das es Hashem bilvad. AI can't experience das Hashem. Yidiyas Hashem is ha'adam yoda es chava. Tanya Peter Gimel, his kashrus, his chabrus, the visceral experience of Hashem. Lo das es Hashem bilvad. When the Rebbe Rashab said, I sit in my room and I open a Likutei Torah, is Yedaitiv Hayisiv. AI can't do that. AI can take care of everything else. A Bacha told me the other day, he says, that's going to be boring. I said, no. The moment you will experience what Das Hashem is, any bliss you ever had in life is not even of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of this, because it's the source of all bliss. And then finally, as we live in a world where sadly, the great tragedies of our times, happen through the most vicious of anti-Semites, but even more sad that it was Jews themselves who resurrected the enemy, even if they had good intentions, and they did not realize what they were doing. They did not realize, as a Navi Hashem pleaded with prime minister after prime minister after prime minister after prime minister, with every man of influence in Israel, every concession of territories, even talk of concession, every compromise, every demonstration of weakness is not creating peace. It's creating a Pchia L'Doros, a catastrophe of generations. And it's here again where the Rambam can heal the Jewish people and heal the world. Because the Rambam was telling the Jewish people, Oz leoi evoish, b'habiti el kol mitzvaysecha, Stop being embarrassed with who you are, with what you are, with what your vision is. Speak to the world the truth. Tell them that this is one piece of land that the Creator of the world gave to His eternal people as an eternal inheritance. It's not even ours to speak about, to negotiate, to give away. The world is craving for Ozloi Eva Ishba Bitil Kol Mitzvah. It's only the vision of the Rambam, the vision of Moshe that come to Moshe, the vision that in our generation the Rebbe sacrificed his entire life to inculcate in the masses, to be able to stand up to a world and say we have a mission to create a Welt into a Torah Welt of Loi Rov, Loi Milchama, Loi Kinen, Loi Tafus, Toiv V'tiyah Mushpas Harbe, Mola Oretz Deus Hashem, Kamayim Layom Chasim. The world respects Jews who can stand up with conviction, respecting their Judaism, their God, their history, their heritage, their roots. A non-Jew is not embarrassed to say, I'm ready to occupy a whole section of this land. And Jews who God gave it to them and gave it to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are afraid to say it. Comes the Rambam and says, there's a vision, there's a grand vision. Speak the truth to the world so they will listen. They respect you when you respect your God, when you respect your soul, when you respect your Torah. This is the time when as you go home, take out that Rambam. And again, whether it's the 44th, 45th time, or it's the 40th time, or maybe it's the second time, or maybe, it's the first time. If you don't tell, I won't tell. Take him out. Take out the Rambam. Let Jewish history come to life. Let divinity come to life. Let halacha come to life. And let your soul come to life. Yes, it's not always as loud and inspiring as a big event. You're going to get to Hilchos Shabbos and you're going to have to plug away 30 difficult chapters. You're going to get to Hilchos Tumas Meis, and we wish you a lot of hatzlacha on behalf of all the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Plow it through. Give that gift to yourself. Give that gift to your home. Give that gift to your brain and soul with patience, with consistency, and with chazorah. The Rebbe didn't start learning Rambam in 1984. The Rebbe would make a Siyum HaRambam every few years when nobody realized the Rebbe was learning Rambam for years and years and years and years. The Rebbe made a Hadran Tov Lamed Hey, a huge historic Hadran, one of the most amazing Hadranim. Yud Aleph Nisim Mem Daled. 1 year before he started Rambam, he made a Hadran on the Rambam. A year later, he probably finished Rambam again. It's just my own estimation. And he came out with a takana for everybody. Exactly Tavshin Mem Daled. Why then? I don't know. I do know that was exactly 40 years before Tavshin Pei Daled. And I also know that Shmini Atzeres at night, the Rebbe danced more than usual, and he said the next night that he saw that Amcha Yisrael Tzrichim Simcha. And therefore, Shmini Atzeres, he already started Simchas Torah. The Rebbe also said that the Rambam has 83 halachas and is the gematria of Machala. Mem, Ches, Lamed Hey, Vasiroisi, Machala Mikirbecha. And he said that learning Rambam has a power to help us heal from illness. And I think it meant not only physical illness, but also mental, spiritual, emotional, social, psychological. Somehow, learning and living with the Rambam has within it power that we can see, power that is above what we can see. And in one of the last Farbrengens, the Rebbe said an expression, and I could still hear it from the Rebbe's mouth. He said then, and for this you have to know Yiddish, the Rebbe said, das ist ein von der Sibes, was man sich verlegt auf lernen Rambam. Anybody knows how to translate the word verlegt in English? Verlegt is a very unique word in Yiddish. Verlegt in simple English means it's one of the reasons why I became obsessed and overwhelmed and completely dedicated. Verlegt, you're like completely entrenched and immersed in learning Rambam. Those of us remember that Rebbe would come back from the oil. There were times in later years he came back close to midnight, late at night, fasting a whole day, standing in one place, 6, 7, 8 hours, And when you saw him coming home, what was the Rebbe learning? He was in the car late at night. The Rebbe was learning Rambam. It's a verlegt auf lernen Rambam. As we celebrate tonight, the Siyum HaRambam. And I have to say, one of my earliest memories as childhood is Rabbi Shmuel Butman, the legendary chairman of the Siyum HaRambam, visiting my father, Aleim HaShalom, in our house and making sure that the Siyum gets promoted and advertised. And I also heard a little negotiation here and there, but what happens inside the house stays inside the house. And just remember those years of the dedication, the Mesiras Nefesh, to ultimately fulfill the vision, and the real vision is not this Siyum HaRambam. This is beautiful and it's amazing. The vision of Siyum HaRambam is that 90,000 Jews should fill up a huge, huge stadium, because the moment people will realize the extraordinary value of learning Rambam, Sai Mitzad HaNefesh HaLekis and Sai Mitzad HaNefesh HaBahamis, the consciousness of Limud HaRambam will literally spread to the whole of Klal Yisrael. Umala ha'aretz deyes Hashem kamayim layom mechasim amen v'yamen. Thank you. Mazel tov.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.